It says we're live.
Oh, here we go. I think we're on. All right. If
We're
you
good.
can see us, let us know.
Can you see us? Is anybody there? Oh, it shows they're live there. Let's see what happens. Oh, there we go.
I don't know if I'm seeing it on Facebook. So if anybody on Facebook can say
it's
hello.
on a delay. So it's going to show us talking. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start our intro video. It's a nifty little video that Julie made, and so we'll have fun with that. Check it out. Hold on. We are crime crashers. We challenge the code of silence that keeps witnesses from coming forward. We push law enforcement to solve these crimes. Our goal is to give a voice to victims and bring justice to unsolved cases. Join us as we take this journey into crime and justice by crashing through the barriers with the crime crashers. Sorry, that's pretty funny. It's pretty cool. So first thing I want to say is please go easy on us. This is really our first time. And, technically we've tried to do our homework and get everything set up. And, but we could hit some stumbling blocks along the way.
Awesome.
So I'm Jenny and this is Julie. And we put together a little presentation to share that kind of helps create some visuals to go through this. We are presenting on the Julie Ferguson cold case, and she was murdered back in 1995, and it's still unsolved. So our goal here with the Crime Crashers is to bring attention to this, hopefully encourage somebody to come forward who maybe hasn't come forward before, has information. It's been nearly 30 years, and it's really I think a lot of people who cared about Julie want to see justice in her lifetime, and Julie has really led the charge on that a lot. So I'm grateful to have her here today. So I'm going to go into our presentation, and we will just kind of start from here. Julie, do you want to introduce?
Sure. Yeah. Hi. I wanted to say hi to you guys. Thank you so much for showing up and doing this with us. Please pop in comments at any point and we'll try to get them answered. So it's more of a conversation between all of us and not just, sitting through a presentation. So, so as most of you know, Ken Mains, he has a YouTube channel that is called Unsolved No More, and he looks at cases, mostly cold cases, and tries to get them back into the spotlight. So we're going to kind of go into like what our roles are and how Ken Mains got introduced to this whole thing. So you want to say more about it?
No, we'll just go to the next slide and kind of go through the trajectory here. Again, I'm Jenny with Crime Crashers, and this is our YouTube channel. I hope that if you're watching that you subscribe, and this is just the beginning. We said episode 1 for a reason. We have future things that we'd like to really dive deeper on. There's so many little things that we can really dig into. So there will be more of these, and we look forward to sharing that with you. So I'd like to introduce Julie.
Go ahead, Julie. Thank you, Jenny. So she's been awesome. I'm so thankful to have you here doing this. I've got on my pink Crime Crashers color shirt just to, support, and thank you for doing this because, So anyway, I'm Julie, and I'm an advocate for Julie Ferguson. That just means I kind of keep her case in the public eye. I work with the cold case unit, just kind of checking in, making sure that they're still looking into Julie's case, that it doesn't become dormant, that it doesn't get swept under the rug. And then also it involves going on different television shows, and that's usually coordinated through the cold case unit. Like they'll reach out to us and then I'll find other people to come onto the shows. Can you go to the next one?
Yes.
Okay. So if you want to learn more about what an advocate does and what we don't do and kind of the different roles and the frustrations and the partnerships that happen, there is a presentation and it is on the Crime Crashers YouTube channel. So you can kind of go through that at your leisure.
Yes, it's shared. And I just want to add that when you're dealing with a cold case like this, something that I think both of us can speak to a little bit is nothing happens quickly. It's an exercise in patience, and you really have to be willing to, go through a lot and jump through, over a lot of hurdles. And I think that, we're just doing another thing to try to help. So we wanted to showcase Julie Ferguson, and Julie is going to tell you a little bit more about her.
Yeah, so a lot of us who are here probably knew her in some way or another, but in 1995, she was a student at Eleanor Roosevelt High School. She lived in Greenbelt, so she was able to walk to school and walk to a Greenway shopping center where she had a part-time job. She was super fun. These are how other people have described her and how I would describe her as well. She was super fun. She was lighthearted, bubbly, popular. She's pretty. I thought she was kind of goofy, as you can see in the upper left-hand side. Like, she wasn't afraid to kind of be goofy. She lived with her mom. She was an only child. Her father passed away when she was young. So it was her and her mother living in a townhouse in Greenbelt. And yeah, so this is pretty much her. She didn't, that's a picture of her at homecoming, but she went to different dances and did different things. And the picture in the front with the green kind of turtleneck with the vest, that's how I remember her. So, and these pictures are courtesy of a family friend of theirs. So I just wanted to give them a shout out too for.
Yes. And, while I didn't know Julie personally, I think we had a lot of mutual friends. And
yeah, she was.
I remember. Sorry, go ahead.
Somebody added that she was silly.
Yeah, silly. Yes. But, I still remember, reading the first article about it and just sort of being shocked, by what happened to her. But I love that we can kind of capture a little bit of her personality here in these pictures. And one thing I can tell you is that she was very much adored by a lot of people. So, you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a few snapshots of the Greenway Shopping Center where Julie was last seen. She worked at the Linens and Things, which was in the same shopping mall. And when she was done with work around 9:30, she went and went over to the liquor store and then purchased a beverage and came and sat on this actual flower planter here. And Julie's going to talk to you a little bit more about what these pictures depict and what they say about the situation that she was in.
Yeah, so I don't think that big bush was there. So I think that the view would have been even lower. Like, I think they just put flowers in there at that point. So what I wanted to show you all here, this is a recent picture. It's not from 1995, but if you look on the right, you can see a dark gray car. And that is a car pulled up in front of the liquor store. You can see how wide that road is. I have gone to Greenway Shopping Center on and off over the years. There is always a car there, always, just like waiting for somebody to hop in and hop out. So that wouldn't have been unusual. And you can see that there's a lot of space for someone to kind of go around. So just wanted to point that out, that that's kind of a common thing that goes.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed, putting this into perspective here, is just, the planter is right there next to the road. And, so that, and the stores right behind it are right there. The other thing, this picture on the bottom right was taken during the day, but from what, we've both experienced being Greenbelters, is that it's a pretty busy shopping center, even in the evenings like that. And the liquor store had multiple people coming in and out in that time frame throughout that window of time. So it certainly wasn't an isolated area. And just wanted to make sure to point that out.
And different people had seen her too, like people who were going in and out of the liquor store, somebody who was going to Wendy's, like, and there was a Denny's in that shopping mall kind of on the other side, but people were going there. And I believe that some of her friends said that they saw rollerbladers in the parking lot when they
Yeah.
started at 10. So, and police are always at Greenway Shopping Center too. So this is, it's an outdoor mall. It's, it's busy up until closing about.
Yeah, and just to kind of put things into perspective, multiple people who saw Julie that you know, witnessed seeing her were people who knew who she was. Greenbelt, for what it's worth, is a fairly small town. When you're walking around the Greenway Shopping Center, you're going to run into people there if you're a local. So that's another thing is those people walking by her, they were just like, oh yeah, we saw a girl there. They knew who they saw personally.
I mean, I worked there and tons of people were, it was like where the high school scholars got jobs too. So
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. The high school that she went to is directly across the street from the shopping center. And I know for myself, I used to skip lunch and go to the Wendy's there. So just to give you perspective, I could walk to the Wendy's in 5 minutes, have lunch, and walk back, and no one would ever know. That was before they were really good about security. So that just that's a visual of where she was last seen by any witness herself as a person sitting there on that flower.
Yeah, if you go to the next one, you can see kind of how close Julie was to the liquor store. This is kind of like my shots. Like I took this from one angle from outside of the liquor store. So that bush probably would not have been there. And the car that was seen that had pulled up would have been further back.
Yeah. And for me, again, looking at this, it really kind of puts it into perspective for me how close the store was to where she was sitting. We're not talking 50 feet away. We're talking 10 feet here. And so certainly if there was a commotion, a scream, they weren't far away. So those are definitely things that are interesting. And we'll get a little bit more into the timeline, but there was a witness who saw her there on the way in and did not see her on the way out. So that was a very short time window. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it puts into perspective that people were right there.
Sorry. Somebody over in the comments said that's, oh, you know what? I'll just clicky click. Is it showing?
Oh, sorry. Wait, did you want me to click?
There we go. Yeah. So that spot was central to the main entrance too. So it wasn't in the corner or the back.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Actually, you can almost see that in one of the last pictures where it kind of shows the cars driving by. You can almost see where it turns the corner, and that's the main entrance and exit to the shopping center.
Yeah.
And
there was supposed to be a guard inside the liquor store too. They didn't notice anything strange.
Yeah. So this slide here actually depicts, and guys, keep sharing this information. It's actually really cool. And we might not catch every comment right now, but we're definitely going to be going back and reading things. So any insights that you have when you see this would be awesome to share and very helpful, I think, for people who see this. But these newspaper clippings are from, back when this happened. And, Julie, do you want to talk a little bit about these?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I recently went back through and got all of the newspaper articles that I could find from the Washington Post, the Washington Times, the Greenbelt Gazette, the Greenbelt News Review, and I don't know if I'm leaving one out, but there wasn't a ton out there. It just kind of like there were like 3 or 4 articles and then it just kind of petered out. I'm going to be updating the website and posting everything there so that everybody can kind of go through what the initial newspaper articles were about. And I'll get into Ken Maines, but he firmly believes that if you don't have access to the police files, reading those initial reports is really important before the facts get kind of diluted.
Yeah. One thing that I want to say is just, a step on the outside here. Back then I didn't have TV. I had newspapers and I read it because it was my only form of information and entertainment. But looking back and doing the research into the articles actually kind of made my heart drop. There's just not a lot out there, and it made me feel like there was no like real attention on this. It was like it happened, there were a few articles, and like maybe every 5 years there's something new that comes out, but it's sort of like we're getting further and further away from the fact that this girl, lost her life. And, part of our goal here is to get a little closer to that, bring things back into refresh people's memories and make people really think and, hopefully wrestle up some more information. But there's just not a lot of articles. And you do see some inconsistencies. If you read them back to back, you're going to see inconsistencies, especially over time, and different things that come forward. And, this particular live stream, we are not going to dive as deep into these articles, but trust me when I say we are going to be doing deeper dives into these because there's good information in there and things that we really want to talk about on a deeper level. So this next slide is actually the map. And Julie, you want to describe this a little bit?
Yeah, so this, if you look from the left to the right, she was taken, and Ken Main's video gets into it that we know where she was abducted from because her items were left behind. There was her drink left there, and people had seen her there. So we know that that's where she was taken from, and then takes you to Daisy Lane. I was speaking with somebody recently, and they pointed out, like, it seems like it looks actually appropriately long on this map here. But 5 miles doesn't sound like that much, but it is the longest ride. There is a light. Like I did the drive not too long ago, and I don't know if they did that night, but I hit every single light. Like it is a long ride. And
it does feel oddly far away. And I don't know why it felt like that because, I grew up there, nothing felt that far away, but when I actually drove it once too, and I thought, gosh, this is it is long.
It is. Oh, Carrie, and anybody else, if you have any of the Raiders Roosevelt articles, please email them.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. That would be somebody would be really meticulous about saving stuff, but if you have a high school newspaper, that would be awesome. A little bit with this map, I mean, that shows where they went. To put it into perspective too, that's kind of going away from Greenbelt and kind of in an area that would be a little unknown to people who are from out of town, things like that, especially Daisy Lane. It's sort of, it's actually a place that a lot of people we knew about, used to hang out at. It's I think Julie described it as semi-rural, and we'll show you some pictures of that next, but it really does highlight the fact that this was sort of a random out of the way road that, the fact that our age group, and I was a little bit older than Julie, our age group knew about it, hung out there. It wasn't too far from the Glendale Hospital, which was a place that if you grew up down there in our day, you would know about it. It was sort of the haunted, abandoned hospital. Is only a short pathway away from Daisy Lane, and both places were hangouts. And so that was something that always interested me. But, again, it's just, we'll just go to the next slides and take a look at this to put it into perspective. Julie, do you want to talk about this?
Oh, wait, going right is... Yes, this is so important too, right? Going right is contrary. Going right from Greenway Shopping Center onto 193 is contrary if you want to flee because you can get to the Beltway and the Parkway. This is a suburb of Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Allie. That's a very good point, and kind of what I was thinking in my head, didn't know how to say. But you're going deeper into the local area. If you've just abducted someone and you're not from in town, you would probably want to just get on the highway, which was right there. There was, the 495 and the Baltimore Washington Parkway, not too far away is 95. So it is interesting. And that's a good point that, they went sort of further away from maybe a better escape route.
Yeah, and I don't know if Julie hung out on Daisy Lane prior to her abduction. I don't know if it's a place that she would have gone necessarily. I think it's more that her abductor or abductors would have gone.
Well, and anecdotally, if I'm okay to share this, some of my friends who kind of live, we called it Greenbelt East, who lived on that side of town would go there. There was a skate ramp, and so I'll just read that comment. So there was supposedly a little rickety skate ramp that some of them would go to. The Glendale Hospital was like a known place. When I went there recently, I was sort of, if you walk like 20 feet down from where she was found, there's a pathway through the woods to the hospital. Not that I think that the pathway was taken in particular. It's just, those were two places that I knew about. The Glendale Hospital. I had heard about Daisy Lane. There are people I know who are like, yeah, we used to hang out there. So I think that it's like teenagers finding places to go that are away from the public, so that they can hang out unbothered is probably why if you look at this picture on the top right, that's a view down Daisy Lane.
It doesn't past where she was, but it's a good show.
It's a good,
and like,
yeah, it puts into perspective. This was a small, narrow road. There wasn't any, house. Well, there were some sprinkled houses here and there, but it wasn't developed at the time. Now I think there's more development there. And the picture on the left and in the middle show kind of where she was left, and it shows the terrain. There's this little pull away in the middle picture. That's where they kind of pulled off. And it shows it's very grassy and, just sort of nothing really there.
They went into the pull off and they were facing 193. So it's almost like they had to turn around, or they were, and then this is just conjecture. I should have like a flashing, like, I'm just blah, blah, blahing. But, it's almost like they would have had to have turned around on this narrow road, or maybe that's why they went. That's probably why actually they went into this thing that you can see in the middle. That was the pull out, which is where she was left.
Yeah.
That makes
sense. So one thing that's kind of interesting, we have a lot of people commenting about, was Daisy Lane a hangout? If you know people who grew up around there, it might have been a real time frame thing, because I personally didn't go hang out there because I had my own places to hang out, but I have been to the Glendale Hospital, which is nearby. But Daisy Lane itself was more some other of my friends, and they were all like a year or two older than me. So I don't know if it was just situational that they hung out there, but it would definitely be interesting if you have any information on that or talk to anybody that would know.
About this, I remember her Jessica's boyfriend calling her in the morning. He lived over there. There was a lot of police activity. I think by the time like a friend and I had gone there at like 11 a.m., like everything was gone. Like the police were gone. There was a crime scene tape, but you could just like walk all over it if you wanted to, which was not funny, but kind of.
Erin, that's an interesting piece of information.
That is interesting because was their car damaged?
Yeah.
Was somebody's dark red car damaged?
Yeah. We're going to write all these down. So keep it coming. The one thing that we put in there, fact versus fiction, and part of our goal here is to try to separate that out. So, but any piece of information could wind up being something valuable. But we're going to try to, and maybe we'll be in touch with people that are willing to comment to us. One of the things that Julie said is, if you're not comfortable commenting about something here on this chat, she will be sharing the link to her Justice for Julie website, and there's a place for anonymous tips. So we definitely welcome that. She's got it up on the banner right now, so you can go there and put in anonymous tips. We won't be reading it during this stream, but we definitely encourage that if you're not comfortable saying something, out in the world there.
And there's also the Crime Solvers link too for anonymous tips, and they give you a tracking number, and there is a $27,000 reward. So then you can use the tracking number if your tip ends up leading to somebody getting prosecuted.
I'm just going to pop this in here. I see there's 46 people watching. That's great for our first stream here. Please hit subscribe because we are going to have more of these, and maybe even some of the information that you've given us will become valuable to one of our future episodes too.
Okay. So Tug Speedman here says, I knew nothing about this. What is the quick summary of what is going on? So we are talking about the 1995 abduction and murder of Julie Ferguson in Greenbelt, Maryland, and her case is unsolved. She was abducted outside of her work while she was waiting for a ride in Greenbelt, and her body was found the next morning in Glendale, just by the side of the road. She had been strangled, her throat had been cut, and her hands were tied. So that's, sorry to put it out so bluntly. That's the gist of what happened. And actually, go to the next slide because we're going to go to.
Yeah. So you want to remove the banner bit so you can see this. Paula Zahn did a show. It's on the case with Paula Zahn, and it was on Discovery, ID Network, and some of these other places. And there was good information on there. I mean, you know, when you watch it and you've read all these other things, you can see that there's some things where this is a little bit different than this thing. And that's kind of one of the things we're trying to dig in on is zeroing down on information. We actually are in conversation. Julie is working with the detective to try to get us sit down and go over some details just to confirm things. So that will be, you know, something that we can bring up in a future episode. But Paula Zahn did cover it quite well, and in some ways, and in other ways, we sort of, you know, see some discrepancies. But it's something worth watching if you're trying to find out the general gist of the story.
It goes pretty deep, and more so than like any other. These shows don't do a lot of private investigating, but this one did the most, where they were the most thorough. And
well, the detective is on it too.
Yeah. But I think also things get more confusing the more you put out there. So Rylan here was asking, why would the wire being run into at Daisy Lane indicate the people knew the area? I would assume the opposite, that they didn't know the area nor the wire and drive into it accidentally, assuming what you heard is accurate. So I wanted to say to that, I think, I don't think it implies whether they knew the area or not. We don't know if this is conjecture. Okay, flash that thing again. This is just me, but we don't know if these people were sober.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. They could have. We'll go over a little bit more information, but there's some indication that some suspects that, or potential suspects, I should say, that were seen, had actually just gone into the liquor store before Julie disappeared. So we don't know if they were sober. The other thing is that's just a very small. I mean, it looks bigger in the picture. And go back and show you. It looks bigger, but it's really small. And you're driving in the dark at night.
It was so dark on that road.
It was so dark. And honestly, there's no lights on that road at that time. And they might have known the pull off was there, but not known the wire was there. So because it was sort of a weird little pull off, and I don't think it was very big at all. So I guess we'll get over to what prompted this. Julie can tell you a little bit more about how Ken Mains came to be involved with the Julie Ferguson case.
Speaking of, I love Ken, but when he drinks on air, it drives me nuts. So I will mute when I drink out of this. Love you, Ken. All right. So Ken Mains, he is, I started watching I've always watched true crime, and I think a lot of us have, just because we wanted to, learn more about maybe what happened to Julie, learn more about the criminal mindset, and that kind of thing. So I've always kind of been into it. And when there's a new crime that's unsolved, I kind of latch on it, particularly if there are any similarities. He had been covering the Idaho 4, and I started watching him along with other people, the 4 students who were killed last year. So anyway, blah, blah. So I have reached out to Bailey Sarian and some other people. I did reach out to Ken. I know he's not everybody's cup of tea, but I really like his blunt style. He shuts off the comments on his videos. You cannot question what he's saying. He just kind of wants to put it out there. So Ken has this YouTube channel called Unsolved No More. He has a bunch of credentials, which I think we'll get into later, but he's kind of qualified to talk about what he's talking about. In this series, Redemption from Death Row, he talks to William Noguera, who has spent 40 years on death row, and he has spent time living with other people who had committed murders, and he talks to them about their mindset. And I think he's written a book, and then he comes on Ken's show and other shows to talk about criminal psychology.
Yeah, just to kind of cover the bullet points that we wrote down before, he has a combined 20 years in law enforcement and the United States Marine Corps. He's been on the History Channel tracking the Zodiac Killer, and on Discovery Science Channel investigating history's greatest mysteries. He's the author of Unsolved No More, one of this country's greatest detectives, quote, and the foremost authority on unsolved cases. He has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, master's in criminal profiling, undercover narcotics, FBI task force, district attorney's office, drug task force, and cold case detective, supervisor and cold case detective. So he's coming at this from, I'm going to take the information that's available to me and I'm going to sort of, kind of examine it and describe what it tells him about this, and keeping in mind that not all the information that he's receiving is accurate because, like I said, there are discrepancies in what's public. He really had some great insights. There's some things where, we may have different information or knowledge, kind of how we showed the proximity. So there's things that we might know being local that may change the point of view. And if he were here on the ground investigating, there'd be a lot, more information at his disposal. But with what he had, he, made some assessments in 2 separate videos. So if you go to Unsolved No More, you can watch those 2. And one of them is this screenshot shows it, that Julie Ferguson, renowned cold case detective, explains what really happened from his point of view based on the information he had available.
Did people see this one? I'm wondering if you all had watched the other one that he did. And that one, he kind of, he just asked for newspaper articles. That's the first one that he did for us, for Justice for Julie Ferguson. And he kind of went, by the articles that he read, he said, don't tell me anything else. I don't want to know. I just want to read the report and then go off of that. So that's what he did there. And he had, I guess we won't get into it too much tonight, but he had said some things in there that we thought were really good, and some things we just didn't agree with. But mostly we'll focus on the second video that he did.
Yeah. So yeah, we're kind of pulling things that they talked about in both videos. The slide that you're seeing right now, true or false. One person of interest, Doug DeSilva, was cleared by DNA. So they made this assertion in the second video. And the second video is a little different because he brings this guy in who's in prison for murder, who is kind of, takes one to know one maybe, who's talking about what he thinks based on the evidence, which was actually kind of different from what Ken thinks. It just goes to show everyone's going to see something different. And so, but in this case, they confused a separate case. So there was, Doug DeSilva was a person of interest in this other case, unrelated,
that was
to Julie Ferguson's case. And it made there's some similarities in the cases that kind of got their attention. And if you watched the Palazan case and things like that and read about it, he's a name that comes up. But they said that he was cleared in Julie Ferguson's case, and that's they just mixed up the 2 cases. The information is that he was cleared in the other case that was similar to this. So it's not like he was involved in that case and he's a serial killer who was on this sort of I mean, we don't know anything about Doug DeSilva and what he's done or hasn't done. And there's nothing at this point that excludes him, as a potential suspect in this case, according to, what the detectives currently have investigated.
Yeah,
But
the way that
that case was separate.
Yeah, the way that it was said on one of the TV shows, and then Crime Watch Daily did this whole kind of it got messed up, but they said that he was cleared with DNA. So that is true that Doug was cleared with DNA on another case, and there was actual, what do I want to say, like sample that they could draw directly from. So I guess the term is SA. So that was involved, and they could take that. So yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a minute, Siobhan.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. As we said, it's false, and that particular case was just a separate case, and they just confused the two. So we're kind of, moving on from that. And this is a quote that we took from Ken Mains, and he said, "This is a prime example of how important it is to have police reports because one little detail can throw off your whole assessment." And I think Ken is right with that. And I think that some of the information that even Ken had could have been, not 100% what the detectives have and what was on their actual police reports. So these are things that we found in their assessment, that there are little details like that we might have information on that's a little different than what he read. So we're going to keep going. Did you want to say anything about that, Julie?
Yeah, I do. Because the reason that William Noguera in Ken Mains' video went down the road that he went about the two perpetrators and them not relieving themselves, I don't even know how to say it, but, leaving their DNA next to Julie or on her or around her. He was taking that from like his assumption that this is the kind of people these are because there was DNA from another person. So we know that they had that type of DNA. So this must have been a sexual crime. And because of his misunderstanding about one person being clear on DNA in Julie's case, which was not correct, he assumed that they had that type of DNA and that it was also available in Julie's case. So it took him down this road, and he explained some things that were kind of graphic and kind of things that you can kind of clear out of your head because there's nothing to tell us that that's what went down. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. And Ken talks about the 3 or 4 motives. It's either, what did he say? What were they?
GSR, greed, sex, or revenge.
Right. So this guy is saying it was sex. In the other Ken Mains video, he's saying it's greed.
So Jennifer's saying she doesn't agree with their assumptions on this case. I'm assuming you're talking about Ken Mains, and I tend to agree that there's areas where I think they diverge. In Ken's first video, there was actually more things he said that resonated with me, and we made sure to put some of that in this slideshow. So a lot of people are asking the DNA question. Suffice to say that part of the reason I'm doing Crime Crashers is a lot of these cold cases, they have not even done DNA pass-throughs since decades ago, and technology has changed. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to bring to the forefront, and hope that as the technology changes, that there's opportunities to examine the DNA. But, I think that to quote the detective on the case, he has 1,300 cases. So sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that's really important to solving a case. And so this is our squeaky wheel, and we're going to try to bring stuff like that and any other details and information that might help them uncover things, get, to speak to more potential witnesses. Again, it's almost 30 years ago, maybe people who were scared to come forward back then. Maybe you have children now and you can't imagine how you'd feel if that was your child. And so I definitely want to appeal to you to come forward and make this, I mean, and here's the thing about coming forward, they're not advertising that. Okay. There's a lot of things that get it to the point where a district attorney is going to have a case against somebody. But every bit of information counts. And, that those things aren't just being disclosed publicly if somebody comes forward. And they're very sensitive to that. So, the other thing that
Sorry,
one of
stop.
sorry.
Just real quick, because somebody asked if the police reports can be accessed by the public, and then someone else said, no, it's an open case, so they won't release it. And that is one of the big frustrations. So there's some things that we don't know, we can't figure out. So going to somebody like Ken Mains, for me, I thought, okay, maybe he can give us some more insights, give us something new, because hearing the same old things doesn't really do much. But I also think it introduces sometimes bad information, not intentionally. And that's the frustration. Like, no, if we did have the case files and we could give them to a profiler, and I would love to see a profiler invited in back on the case to focus on it. So I just want to like that. It's a frustration because the police hold all the information. They don't have all the time in the world to focus just on Julie's case.
Well, and I think Julie is always seeking ways to, use the Freedom of Information Act to get what we can, but they're going to, hold things close to the vest. And honestly, this is to me sort of like a reform thing on a bigger scale. Who's actually policing the police to make sure they're doing this stuff? And nothing. I think that it's a tough job, and I have a lot of respect for it. And definitely going through this, there's a lot of things I understand are very difficult. And there's so many cases. I mean, how many? Like I said, 1,300 that was sitting in his lap. So, but if you go back to 1995, how thorough were they? That you imagine an investigation, you start, if you ever watched crime shows, they tend to start with the people closest to the victim and work their way out. And, how many people did they really talk to? We have no idea how thorough that even was and what they have to work with now as a result of that. So there's no accountability, in my opinion, to make the police move faster on something, to re-examine the case in any kind of meaningful way. There's a pecking order, and there's limited time to focus on all these cases, and they don't even remember half these cases. So it's our job to try to bring that to their attention. And so, those are things, that's part of why we're doing this. Let's get into this, the Jetta red car. So basically in Ken Main's second video, there was this prison guy. What's his name again? William Nagara. I'm just going to do a disclaimer on myself and say I'm not particularly fond of these guys getting to do these things because it's like getting them attention. But I also understand that, this is a very important part of criminal profiling, and I totally understand why this is important to Ken. And there's a few things he said in the thing where it's like, not my cup of tea. Let's put it that way. But one thing that he did was he kind of just made this statement that the Jetta was not involved and dismissed it. And, we're going to talk more about the Jetta. So what he said was this: I don't believe the Jetta was involved. People who saw her leaning into the car didn't see a confrontation or anything to imply she was in distress. The person would have reported that she was fighting to get out of the car. Her clothes and soda were left there. If she had gone on her own accord, she would have taken her items. She knew the people in the car that the witnesses saw her talking to. They weren't a threat to her. And I could flip this around on him and say, okay, let's take the assumption that she knew the people in the car, which, if I were making assumptions, I agree. Were they or weren't they a threat to her? maybe she didn't think they were, and they were. But the fact that she was leaning into it is something that both Julie and I have discussed. When you grow up around our area, you don't just lean in towards cars when there's like people you don't really know. So, we've thought that that's a possibility, that she was leaning in because she knew someone in there. And the fact that she wasn't in distress. So, when we go back to that picture of the proximity to the liquor store, if she had been screaming and trying to get away or fighting back, which we know Julie had defensive wounds. At some point, she did fight back. She was a fighter. Yeah, she was a fighter. And so, the fact that she didn't fight at all when she was already outside the car in an area where people right there knew who she was, to me indicates that she may have known the people in the car. And I think actually, from my perspective, that was extremely likely. So for him to sort of say, "Oh, let's brush this detail off," when it's the red Jetta, for anyone who's familiar with the case, shows up 3 different times. Now, we can't say it's the same red Jetta. That's not a proven fact. And we are trying to take fact and fiction, but it's we'll get into that a little further as we go. So I'm just going to go to the next slide and talk more about the Jetta. Do you want to talk about this, Julie?
Yeah. So, we have newspaper articles. I totally forgot until I went back into it, and maybe you all will remember this too, but we didn't hear anything about a red car until April. Now, it happened at the end of March, but I think it was like April 6th. So it's not that far out, but this car was seen parked in front of Julie. A witness came forward later, or that I don't know when they came forward, but they said that they saw 3 people exiting a car that was parked in the parking lot that looked like that car. And then it was seen again by a witness on Daisy Lane. So, can you go to Ken's thing, or we can show you real quick what the car might have looked like, because we've heard that it could have been a Golf or it could have been a Jetta, but it's yeah.
So the Golf and the Jetta are very similar cars. One's a hatchback and one's a sedan. And these 2 models look a little different on the front, but they were very, very similar. So from a certain angle, you might not know the difference. But Stephen thought that the red Jetta was ruled out. Actually, no, it has not been ruled out. That's a very important thing to know. Let me sit back for a second and talk about the timeline, because I think this is important. All of these are witness sightings. Okay, so it's a human being relaying to the police this information. And we can connect these dots, but what Julie was describing is a witness within, I think, about 15 minutes is what we agreed, around 15 minutes before Julie was seen for the last time. This car was seen in the parking lot with 2 black men and 1 black woman, where the 1 black man and 1 black woman of the 3 were getting out of the car, and 1 black man stayed inside the car, and they went to the liquor store. And there's corroborating, witnesses for the liquor store visit. So that car was reported as a red Jetta, similar to the red Jetta that she was seen leaning and talking into. If, in fact, that Jetta is the same Jetta and those people who were seen are in the car, then Julie was talking to, presumably, 2 black men and 1 black woman in the car. And if she knew them, that's something to think about. Does anyone know who she might have known that could fit those descriptions? And we'll dive into these news articles later, but there is an article in 2000 that goes into this much more in a bit more detail, and says that based on that information and sort of the short window of time and the coincidences of it all, they really believe that the people in that vehicle that were witnessed that day and fit those descriptions are relevant to the case and potential suspects. So that is definitely something that we'll dive into more in future episodes when we read those articles and talk about, the people who were seen and what they described them as and things like that. But right now, this red Jetta, I think the fact that this guy on Ken Main's show talked about the Jetta kind of, kicking it out as an important fact. She was seen talking to them right there at midnight or thereabouts. Don't know the exact time. A witness saw a red Jetta pulled up on the side of the road on Daisy Lane with their lights on, right where Julie's body was discarded. Okay. So that's an important detail, that this red Jetta was in all 3 points where she was last seen within minutes. We'll talk about the time window, but very small time window. It was seen in the parking lot with those 3 people. It was seen talking to her. And like I said, there's no confirmation it's the exact same car. It's just a really important coincidence that the detectives took seriously, at least at some point in the investigation. And it was also seen where her body was found. So this is important information. And Julie brings it up. He says, that's not coincidence, folks. That's your murderer.
Yeah.
So and that was in his first video, right?
Where
so this is
William said, no, it's not related, but the timing is very tight.
Yeah. And let's talk about the timing briefly. She was last seen by a witness at 9:50, and the witness was going into the liquor store. And by the time they came out, just a few minutes before 10, they did not see her anymore. And then at 10 or thereabouts, her friends who were coming to pick her up showed up, and she was not there. And that's when they knew something was wrong. And she had left her beverage that she had just purchased and a bag of her personal items. I think people have asked whether it was a purse or not. It was a shopping bag of personal items. But that window from we'll say 9:50 to 9:58, that's a small window. So, if you imagine the alternative scenario that this red Jetta pulls away and some other red Jetta pulls up, and then that red Jetta abducts her and goes and dumps her, that would be a very big coincidence with the sighting of the red Jetta. And, the fact that it was pulled over on Daisy Lane, not a highly trafficked area, at a time of day or night, I should say, where not that many people were traveling it, on a small semi-rural road with their lights still on, definitely was suspicious, enough so that person remembered that detail and reported it as a witness. So that is a point that we really want to talk about, and people who knew Julie and knew who she might have been acquainted with, we'd love to hear from you. Again, there's the Justice for Julie webpage where you can put in anonymous tips, and you can reach out and share that. And Sarah says the car is the only true link. That's actually kind of true in the sense of there's nothing else that specifically puts anyone else in the proximity of the end of her life. So that's an interesting detail to talk about. So, what do you think? We'd love to hear from you. Julie, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, sorry, I was looking for a link to the about the other case that Julie was not a witness in the CJ Brown shooting. She may have been in the area. She didn't see anything. She was a character witness. There were several other character witnesses for one of the people that was involved in the shooting. He was driving the getaway car. He didn't know exactly what was going on. I don't know. So
a character witness, just so people understand, is you're not testifying against anyone in a way that's going to get them locked up. You're not like a snitch. You're speaking for someone on behalf of someone that you believe has good character, and you're willing to stand up and testify to that. So, the idea that this was related, I think is kind of a little far fetched.
The timing is weird. Okay. Like the timing is weird, but police seem to think that there wasn't a connection.
Yeah. So, and I mentioned the word snitch, and I think anyone who grew up in our area, there's definitely this code of silence thing that people do, and they don't want to tell on people they know, and there might be people here who watching this right now who have information or know somebody or know something, and you may have some sort of discomfort with coming forward. I think it's a value system that was pretty familiar to a lot of us, and I don't personally believe in it, but I know when I was a teenager, I wouldn't have wanted to be that person. I'm hoping a lot of people who were around at that time who might have information have come to see things in a different light, that might be more willing and hopefully less scared to come forward. I mean, I think that it's always
Because the era ended, though, the snitches get stitches. I don't
yeah,
know. I mean, I think a lot of us are rightfully, kind of timid about it because it's like on the one hand, some of us have gray hair and grandkids. I don't have grandkids yet, but I've got some gray hairs. And like, I don't know at what point it becomes, I don't know. There's just something unresolved about it. Something, I don't know.
I just wanted to share this because it's an interesting insight, and I tend to agree with it. Possibly, I mean, I leave my purse everywhere all the time. Don't follow me because you might wind up with my purse. But I do think the stitches get stitches thing is funny to me because it's true. I mean, there's a mentality around it, and it is uncomfortable. And in fact, that's probably one of the biggest reasons most cases go unsolved, because in truth, I think there's like almost always somebody who knows something that could crack a case. And I truly and firmly believe that there's somebody knows something in this case. And in fact, I do know that there are people who have come forward, and I compliment you for that. And but it is frustrating, and it's hard to come forward and then have it go nowhere. I think that it's like you do this big scary thing to tell information, and then nothing happens because there's just not enough momentum on the case, not enough attention on it. This is our job, guys. This is why we're here. Okay. Maybe we should have everyone bug them, but we definitely want to get attention to the case. So let's talk about the two perps involved. I think somebody else commented previously about that, and that's something that actually both Ken Maines and his prison inmate William Guy, they both agree on, and they kind of describe the scenario. Do you want to paint the picture, Julie?
Let me think back to their video. So they were saying that it would have been really hard for just one person to kind of pull. Julie was super tall. Like she had long limbs. I have one of the things that I struggle with a lot over the years is how did they get her in that car? Because she was super tall. And I don't know how somebody would have been able to subdue her and get her out of there, because like they did say, she was a fighter. And one of our other friends, we're PG County, whatever, like we used to all like play fight with each other, and Julie could whoop your butt. Like I had a big mouth, but she had some might to her. So I don't know, whoever got her in that car was in for a world of hurt and surprise, because she did fight. So why wouldn't she fight immediately? Maybe there was somebody, they were saying maybe somebody was in the back, and because I do think that somebody, I don't want to introduce false information, but I do remember somebody saying, and then maybe the police confirmed it on Paul Lezon, that somebody did see the passenger door open. A witness had said that she was seen leaning into the car. So anyway, so it's just kind of like, who would have the strength to do this? How would they be able to? I don't know.
Yeah, so here's the thing. They introduced the idea of a knife and a gun. You know, how do you scare someone into getting into a car quietly? If you imagine it as an abduction, and you know, someone who submits to that threat could get into a car quietly. Um, and it still feels weird because the liquor store was right there and people she knew were right inside, so that feels weird to me. Just on a personal level, I don't have any information about that, but it's, imagine a knife, because they kind of deduced that it wouldn't have been a gun, it would have been a knife, because women are more likely to freeze when someone pulls a knife. And I thought to myself, that's an interesting fact, that I think came from Ken Maines, who
It
is
came
one of
from
the detectives.
William, who
Oh,
got
did
that.
it?
It came from, I went back and watched it, and he said, whenever I speak to different perps, they say, if you want to make a woman freeze, you put a knife to her, because if you put
Interesting.
a gun at her, she will run.
Okay.
No, I'm not sure.
This is not a very, we don't know how they got this information, but I will say this, when you imagine someone sitting inside a car, how big of a threat are they going to be with a knife when she can just like back up? So, did they get out of the car and pull the knife? I mean, this is a big show now. We're talking a busy parking lot. Most abductions, the perpetrator doesn't want to get caught. They're not, if somebody in fact, that's the first thing that they teach you. And I want to make sure I say this for anyone who ever needs to know it. You scream, you fight, you do whatever you can to stay where you are and not be taken from where you are, because everyone knows, somebody knows where you are, but they don't know where you're going to wind up if you get taken. So the idea that someone could pull a knife while sitting in a car and she would be like, oh no, I better get in the car, doesn't resonate with me. And, like I said, we grew up in an area where you knew to be, there's a bit of street smart, it wasn't, just like, you know, Mayberry, and so the knife theory doesn't resonate to me unless they were out of the car. And then that's a big risk. And people were coming and going. The gun thing, yeah, sure, but again, could she duck? Could she run? Could she, scream? Those are things that kind of, for me, the fact that there was not a single witness to a distressing situation did make me feel like she got in willingly. Maybe she was reluctant. She knew the people didn't really want to go with them. And again, I like to separate fact from fiction. This is just me painting a scenario, just like Ken did in his videos. But her friends hadn't shown up yet. This person may have said, "Oh, it's okay. We'll drive you to whatever. We'll do, and maybe it was an acquaintance, someone she wasn't super close with, but she was like, maybe it took a little coaxing, and then she decided to get in. These are theories of how it could happen, where she got in and maybe she was a little reluctant to get in and a little forgetful of her things. Um, you know, it's just hard
Or,
to know.
hey, leave your stuff, like, just leave some stuff there, and, we'll be I don't know. The soda
Yeah.
throws me off, because, like, I mean, if I just bought a Coca-Cola, this is me, I'm drinking it. Like,
Well, and we don't know how, I mean, I don't know how much soda the soda had left in it. She'd been sitting there for a little
they said it was
while.
very new. They said it was very new. They made a point of that. It was wet with condensation. It was almost like she had just bought it.
Right. Well, just bought it, but like if she had mostly finished it, or if it was like half full, maybe she wasn't even thinking about her beverage anymore. Her thirst had been quenched, and she just was a little. I mean, I can't explain that, other than I've left things so many places it's not even funny. I'm a little bit ADHD, and I don't know Julie to know that she would be forgetful about something. But it may not have been a happy situation, even if she knew the people and got in willingly. Somebody in here commented maybe it was a guy that liked her and she was kind of okay with. I mean, there's scenarios that you can imagine where there wasn't an actual abduction by force, that where she still didn't really want to go. There's possibilities, but there's other reasons why they think two perps were involved. Ken talks a little bit about the way she was killed. So, she was strangled, and he kind of paints the scenario that they didn't leave the car, which is something that is a real possibility, that they drove around for a while with her or pulled up somewhere where they wouldn't be seen, but we know that she wasn't killed where her body was found. But to strangle someone takes a lot of effort and this is a difficult and sensitive topic, but it's not an easy job. And a lot of people who have never, he says, I don't know this personally, Ken says a lot of people who've never done this before don't realize how hard it is and how much they have to fight for it. And that maybe they even realize that she's not fully dead and have to do more. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we got thunder up here. So maybe that effort was not just one time, but over time to try to get, the result that they were aiming for in the end. And some details of the case are that when she was found, her hands were bound. Julie, were they bound behind her back?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but at some point she had been fighting, which would have happened before she was bound. So whatever was happening, there was a struggle and a fight. And I guess to prevent her from defending herself, they tied her hands. All of these things could suggest to perpetrators because of just the work.
Well, I wonder, like Teresa here is saying, you'd have to be really strong and angry to strangle, in my opinion, instead of doing it another way. What boggles my mind about the whole crime is that they strangled her and then her throat was cut. So if you had a knife the whole time, why aren't you using it then? Like, why do it this way? There are some things that indicate that this wasn't a planned out crime, and we're going to do a different look at that, kind of like what kind of shows that it maybe wasn't planned and it was kind of sloppy, or whether it was a stage thing or that kind of stuff. Do you agree? We can do something like that.
Yes. Yeah. We'll definitely go into more detail on that in a future episode. I mean, there's so many details you can really dive into. Why didn't they use the weapon? And strangulation is very personal. It really is. And it's you'd have to be pretty dedicated to the end result. The knife was introduced at some point after she was deceased. And that's an interesting detail because I don't know if I talked about it in future slides, but we'll get there. The knife her throat was slit after she was dead. And in the video, they actually talked about the prison inmate, William, talked about it being an act of rage. And, I sort of to me, it felt very controlled. My first reaction when I heard it was actually, we're not 100% sure she's dead. So let's just, here's insurance. She's not going to come back and wind up being able to, point us out and say we did this, I see it as insurance to make sure she's definitely dead by somebody who doesn't know what dead fully looks like. And that it was just that one final extra step because it's so
different styles. So maybe somebody did one in one, conjecture, but I just wonder, like, if there was somebody who was a little more like.
It's hard to say. I mean, what we do know is that at some point in time there was a knife in their possession.
Yeah.
I know a lot of our friends in that area carried knives and stuff, like pocket knives and things like that. I don't know what kind of knife this was.
Okay. I want to get to Chrissy's question real quick, but she said, what did they tie her hands with? So we've all heard like kind of different things, but there's something to imply that it wasn't necessarily planned. It was something kind of improvised.
So actually that's a good point, because in one of the videos of Ken Mains, he talked about, if they had like rope or cord or something, that would indicate premeditation, that they brought it with them to commit a crime. It's sort of like the murderer kit of things, maybe, with rope in it. But we don't know the details on it, but we know that it was something that was improvised as something that would be available to tie someone's hands with that you weren't expecting to have to tie up. Again, another reason why we think that this was sort of an unplanned thing. Ken did a perp profile that I thought was pretty interesting. And so as far as the other person there thing, I do want to mention that I thought that was kind of interesting. And this is the first thing in this with Ken's perp profile. And he, like it said in his credentials, he's done profiling. And he said it was his assumption was it was two guys, and the killer is the alpha dominant type. The other one is the more laid back and does what the more alpha guy wants. So there's one in particular who's got this bigger agenda of harming her, and the other one who's sort of the sidekick to that person.
And they were saying that maybe the sidekick wanted something different out of it. That was what they were speculating. Like, they're not necessarily a good person, like, oh no, what are we doing? They were kind of like, hey, we could do this if you want to come along, but yeah. And someone here said it felt like a message was being sent. And that's interesting because of the crime scene and how it was left.
So I think it was a lazy crime scene. I think that they pulled up, got her body out, didn't bother to hide it.
I mean, helicopters were out at that point looking for her. Because she was there for 2 hours. I always thought like they had her all night, but it came out later. And if I looked at reports more closely, I would have known that. But because somebody saw her or they saw the car on the side of the road at like 1 a.m. or something like that. And she was taken around 10. So maybe they came back. I mean, I'm just,
it's we don't, there's gaps. And actually that would be something really important. We don't know if these guys were local. We don't know if they stopped somewhere en route and somebody knows that something suspicious was going on. But there's a 2-hour window from the time she was reported missing to the time the car was seen on the side of Daisy Road. And anything in those 2 hours is complete mystery in terms of what's been reported so far. So his profile includes that this person would have had no job, nothing to do but hang out. We know some people like that just were always hanging around Greenbelt. He said young, in the early 20s.
The older one was at least
in his, whoever the alpha was definitely
inexperienced.
This was not an experienced killer. They were in their early 20s, and this is the profile. This is an assumption based on the way the crime played out. A more experienced killer might have done certain things differently. They might have been more prepared and had something with them. There just this opportunity arose or something went wrong. But, so this is not someone who's like an experienced killer and he assumes early 20s. There's no job and nothing to do but hang out.
Getting started. This is probably an earlier crime of theirs. This is what they were saying, that it didn't go exactly as they planned. So they're going to do it again in order to achieve what they wanted to achieve. But he was assuming that.
We don't know that. I mean, if it was somebody, I mean, all of this is assumptions. And I want, again, the fact versus fiction, everything that's put there is just based on an accumulation of information. And these were things that they discussed. The one thing that, I find interesting, the no job, nothing to do but hang out in their early 20s. If somebody knows people like that fit that kind of description, and if we assume, again, these are all assumptions, that there were 2 Black males and a Black female in the car, if you know people that she was acquainted with that might fit those descriptions, that's an important detail. And we're just triangulating information. That doesn't mean anything. in terms of what can actually be, we can actually hang our hat on. But if you have information on that kind of person, I just saw a comment up there that went away. Was there sexual assault? Do you want to talk about that, Julie?
So yeah, as far as we know, she was fully clothed. There was a description of what she was wearing. So in one of the earlier articles, and I gotta get that website sorted out so you can see them all. But she was wearing a skirt, so I think like they would know if there was an attempt or some sort of something. So she was fully clothed. There was no sign of sexual assault. According to everything the police have said, Ken and his guest were saying, like, well, maybe the police didn't reveal that for one reason or another. And then the conclusion that they both kind of came to was there's no reason to hide that.
Well, and there's, and again, this is the media and things get twisted, but I think it was actually a quoted thing, but and this is just memory, that they said there is no signs of sexual assault. Does that eliminate the fact that there was a sexual motive, an interest in that, a sort of a power move against somebody who, was being rejected? I mean, I don't know.
Sometimes these people are impotent. They can't complete the act. They can't, but this is talking about a certain type of criminal who doesn't complete the act. So they might not get to, or they might.
Yeah, they in Ken Main's video, the inmate guy created some scenarios around it that I thought were a stretch. Even with the skirt on, if they were even grabbing at her legs, she would have bruises on her legs. Those can be signs. And there was, according to what they came out with, no signs of sexual assault. And I do think that can tell a story. But I do think
we would need to know. And that's where the police report is so important, and why, if they would give it to a profiler like Ken with his credentials, wow,
that would be
how much faster could we figure out who this is, who this isn't, for real.
Right. And so that's all really important information. So I'm just
okay. We should probably move on. Right?
Yeah, we've got a few more slides to go, so we're going to move a little faster. We've discussed this: the stranger or someone she knew. That's something that they talked about too, and they kind of discarded the notion that it was someone she knew. But I disagree with that. I don't think it should be discarded. I think it's potentially important, just because she was seen leaning into that car and talking to them, and she was not in distress. And using their own comments against them on this. That doesn't rule out either one in terms of the facts that are available in the case. But, one of the reasons we're doing this is because if in the instance that it's someone that she knew, there's probably other people who know something that could be very useful. If it's a stranger, that can be a bit more difficult. But in most investigations, they start close to the person for a reason, because a vast majority of crimes are committed by someone you know. And occasionally there's those random weirdo, psycho, serial killer types that are lurking around. But the odds are in favor of being someone she knew in terms of just mere statistics. And then there's some indications that it's possible that it's someone she knew just based on her chatting with them. Could be someone just coming up and asking a question and trying to lure her in too.
Yeah. I think I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah. But there's also, because Julie was supposed to get off at 9:30, her friends they closed early that night. And according to some of her friends, if she got off at 9:30, she didn't leave at 9:30. They were inside. It was linens and things, people throwing stuff all over the place. They had to refold the whatever, I guess not the towels, because that's a fake thing. I've just learned that online, but where you see the towel display. But anyway, so that's just fake. But she had to put all the bedding away and anything that fell in the aisles and straighten everything up. But this night, her manager closed the store early, so she was out early. So I don't know if it matters, because if they knew her or if they didn't know her, they didn't know that she was going to be outside at that moment. it's either, but either way, somebody saw her sitting there and said, let's pull up. That's just what I wanted to say, because I don't think that tells us either way. Like,
Yeah, that in and of itself isn't like
it's a crime of
definitive.
opportunity either way.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that, you know, you know, some of the things that we've talked about where they took her, being more of a local thing and things like that, you know, and, you know, there's a lot of things. What does it say here? Can you read that? I think it would matter.
It's saying, I think it would matter too if the strangulation was from behind or the front, trying to escape versus angrily strangling her with full intent to kill. Looking somebody in the face is, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think that could be why they tied her hands, because she was fighting back for her life, and that was inconvenient. So could it be from the front? Could it be from the back? It could be either. Why did they not use the thing to tie her hands to strangle her with? That's an interesting thought. That's actually one I haven't had before. But if you had something that could tie her hands, it could also strangle her. So,
answer this for Vanessa too, real quick.
Yeah.
I interrupted. I'm sorry. But the friends weren't late. They were just out early. It was both. She probably, if they had gotten there at 10 and things had gone as they usually did, she would have been in the store, but she was out early. So, but it's both, which is, hold on. Stephen, we are planning on meeting with Detective Nelson in the PD homicide unit again, just to go over like all this information. And that's a problem too with being an advocate and getting the media to cover it, and now getting YouTubers to cover it, because like all this information gets out there. So we really want to, with Crime Crashers, I wanted to work with Jenny to kind of like really get what the facts are.
Yeah, this is a process that we're kind of just starting, and this is supposed to hopefully going to shake some things loose in a lot of directions. And we will dig deeper on a lot of things. We've both talked to Detective Bernie in the past, and you know, the thing is that they, you know, we're trying to be sensitive to like what's been publicized and what's available. And even with those things, there's things that don't fully add up. And so the more we can get confirmation from him on details and information, and, you know, maybe over time he releases a few more things. I mean, it's been a long time, and maybe there's less worry about giving more information that might break the case open. So those are things that we're looking at.
Give us enough so we can figure it out, and
yeah,
some closure that looks different than a trial or any of that. I think it looks, you know, closure looks like a different things to everybody, and what I want, which I try not to influence too much, like the justice for Julie Ferguson, because that's for all of us who knew her. It's not about me and like what I think, and it's changed over the years for me, and I'm sure it has for a lot of us. So,
actually, I wanted to bring up this comment. Some people are just crazy. When they get mad, they do crazy things, or some sick reason for killing. The average human being is not going to understand why someone kills. And, you know, we're used to the idea of a sexual motive. We're used to the idea of a robbery, you know, that kind of stuff. Would someone kill just to exert power and control? Are there people who are just dark and soulless? And the answer to that is yes, to both. And, you know, I know some people like that from Old Greenbelt. And, you know, I feel like socially there were some, you know, potential sociopaths lurking amongst us. And, you know, I think that to try to think that people really need a clear-cut motive, you know, I don't actually think that there needs to be a clear-cut motive. I think, you know, when we look at sexual assault, anyone who's looked into that, It's actually a power related thing. It's oftentimes less about sex and more about power. And sex is just a kind of part of the driving force of the power. Uh, Julie, did you want to address this comment?
Yeah. I'm putting him on blast. Okay.
Should we put his email up there too?
No, I don't think so. I don't want him to cut me off. See, here's the fine line that I walk. I'm annoying, but I can't be like totally annoying. But I think if the general number gets a lot of contact and interest in Julie's case, then they kind of have to go back to it. So they call them red balls. And at one point, Julie was a red ball case. And then the Lyon sisters case kind of was, they got new information in that, and that got pushed aside. So, the game is always changing, and but there's right there. Feel free to call it. Feel free to ask about Julie's case. Let them know, because the media okay, here's where it is. I become white noise or whatever at some point. Like, what really matters is the public and the media. Those things move things forward. Getting the media involved sometimes introduces facts that aren't accurate. So anyway, all right. Let me go back to
the one of the things that we know that there have been witnesses that have come forward with certain information, and Absolutely. We know that so let's put this out there. Sarah's correct. They might feel more comfortable going directly to the detective. You can certainly call. If you would like the email as a more specific thing, maybe you can get in touch with us. You don't have to tell us anything you know. You can do the anonymous tip and ask for the email, and in certain instances, I think we can look into that. But I definitely think that the main goal here is any way possible to get information to him that, especially if you know something. And if you do, I mean, let's face it, whoever you might be going to give information on is someone who killed someone once, and that's a scary thing. I decided, I have ties to people. I even have, information that makes me worried about speaking up, and people who are worried about us speaking up, because it's digging into sort of the inner workings of. I've decided that I'm a mom. My daughter is in that age group. I don't want anything to happen to her, but if anything ever does, I want people to not be afraid to speak up. And I'm telling you, you shine a light on it, and it's scary for the criminal who operates in the dark. That's my feeling. And, so I'm here in the light, shining a light on it. And, to me, we have to be strong about that. And with this, in the slide, we talk about future episodes. There's a lot that we've discussed during this that we will focus like a whole episode just on some of these things. The car, the different rumors and assumptions. We're not going to name names because that could be defamation if we don't have proof. But we can talk about different rumors. We can talk about other cases and other media stories and what they cover. Our goal is to really pick apart the pieces and try to figure out what information is meaningful, which information is accurate, which things are assumptions. When you're profiling, it's understood. It's sort of like an educated, logical guess, but it's still a guess. Yeah, we can name names, but say allegedly. That would be a little tough. So I don't think we'll do that, but it is close and personal, I think, for a lot of people.
And over the years, I'm going to just make it clear, like, I've tried to keep a very open mind about all of this, because I wasn't there. I don't know who did it. Like, I just don't. And, you know, I don't know. I just wanted to say that, like, I feel like allegedly, say
I was
allegedly,
gonna say allegedly.
allegedly, but Ken Mains doesn't like to put people's names on blast, and I was kind of surprised that in the Paula Zahn show they did that. I can get into that later.
Well, and
I won't, but like one of the people were like, "Oh, you don't mention me," and I'm like, "I didn't mention you. I don't do that." Because I don't know. Like
yeah. Well, let's look at it this way, right? It can become a red herring. And, Julie and I have talked about different scenarios, and, we may have different ideas about things and have heard different rumors and things that might take it in more than one direction. There might even be ways to converge some of our ideas, but, and things that we've heard. But it's once you start putting a face and a name to something, it it can be damaging to the final conclusion of the case for a lot of different reasons. Maybe people back away that would have come up and said something. Maybe that person knows that this other person knows and they go and kill that person because that person's the only witness. I mean, that would be, highly suspect at this point. But I mean, only if you could draw a line back to this case. But, let's, pretend for a second, I don't have a crystal ball here, but we talked about the DNA case and the Doug Da Silva, and it was especially interesting to detectives when he had a connection to a very similar crime, and he hadn't been ruled out of that crime yet. That was very interesting to them because it fit the MO. Not exactly. I mean, you could look back and forth and be like, oh, this is different, that's different. But everyone started talking about this one guy. And I'm only saying his name because he's been talked about in the media multiple times. Now, if that guy didn't do it, imagine what his life must have been like at that point in time.
and
But
he has a family too who's very upset about it.
right, but also, under the assumption that he is not the person who did it, now we're marching down this path and everyone's going that direction, and it's taking us away from the truth. And and the truth is known somewhere out there. I truly believe someone knows the truth, but I'm trying to look at this as if I'm trying I'm trying this case. I'm not an attorney, but, familiar enough to know, like, that you have to have evidence. You have to have, good qualifying evidence and, to actually make a case.
Right.
And information can come together to paint that picture, and they can have circumstantial cases. And, with the technology, the DNA could be a factor. There's just so many possible avenues, and and when I say avenues to get information, but by putting out a name, it could change the outcomes. And that's why the police don't usually share too much of that stuff of people they're investigating, because it can actually be destructive to their investigation.
Me maybe being a scary baby, but I also want to say, like, I'm not an investigator. Like, I'm just kind of, trying to push it forward and do all that. But like, I think that we could all kind of make it so that somebody can get dedicated to this case to kind of just look at it again, give it one last try, say we left everything on the field. We're coming up on 30 years. I feel like, it's a final shove, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't say final. We've got a lot of time left, but it is an exercise in patience. There's information on this slide if anyone wants to take this down. And we're about done with the slideshow. So after a beat, I'm going to take this off. And just if you're still here and you haven't subscribed yet, definitely subscribe so you can catch up with our other future shows. And If there's anything that you would like us to talk about in the future shows, please reach out to us. We're going to go back and review all the comments again because I thought there was a lot of interesting chatter. And, you know, I appreciate you guys being here. I know we have some supporters here. And, you know, family and friends of Julie Ferguson, as well as our own, just supporting what we're trying to do. And hopefully, you know, you get the word out and maybe more people come and watch next time, or come, you know, you can share the link to this video. It will be on the @Crime Crashers YouTube page. And, you know, maybe there'll be more people who come and watch it out of curiosity that could have information or know something that would be useful. How do you subscribe? Sorry.
Where is it?
In the YouTube page, I'm going to type that here. So I'm sorry if you hear me typing. Oops. There's a subscribe button on the page, and you know, you should be able to do that, so that when we do future episodes, and we'll live stream to Facebook and to YouTube. But you know, the visibility will hopefully grow, because on YouTube, I know that it can be replayed, and anybody who's searching her name will see it and things like that. So the idea is just to get as many. You don't have to be in the Facebook group to, you know, on YouTube. On YouTube, anyone can search it and see it, and hopefully we'll get more information that way. Julie, you want to go ahead with this slide?
Yeah, I just wanted to give some shout outs to some people who have helped with the case and kind of keeping it out there. And that's, of course, Ken Maines of Unsolved No More. I do believe he has a heart for victims, and he does want them solved. If he puts out any misinformation, it's because he's lacking the exact information. He's not going to take on Julie's case and really dig too deep into it, but he has agreed that if you all want to hear, ask him specific questions about Julie's case, please do send them to the Gmail account, or you can post them in the comments here. You can email them here, and just like, because he has a lot of knowledge about it, and maybe he'll watch this, maybe it'll clear up some misconceptions that he had kind of held on to. Until he has those police reports, it's really hard, but maybe you have questions for him. The Paula Zahn show did such a great job, and the producers were just so responsive, and I just can't, the accuracy of the reenactments. They kept showing somebody smoking. It does make me wonder, there's been questions about DNA. I have wondered if somebody did throw a cigarette out the window or something. If you're going to leave a body on the side of the road, you're likely also just going to toss a cigarette because you just don't care. Like, I don't know. So I'm hopeful there, but they had a lot of details, and I'm so grateful. Detective Bernie Nelson, you know, he has a lot going on. He is responsive in his time about the case. He does try to keep familiar with it. Detective Morissette was on it before. And most of all, you all, thank you so much for being here, joining us at this late time for our old ages. So.
I was going to say, this went longer than I thought we would talk about, but you guys really interacted, and we really appreciate that. Yeah, and you know, we'll have more, and we're excited to soon be meeting with Detective Bernie to clarify some things so that we can maybe provide more accurate information for future episodes. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys. All right. And can I say to the Aarons that you two have the both best profile pictures ever? Got Aaron looking cute here, and then we have other Aaron with this awesome doll.
I love that. I love the hat.
Oh, so good. Sorry, guys.
Oh, that's funny. All right. Thank you so much. Bye.
And this is Julie's cousin, too. Thank you, Benjamin, for coming in.
Yes.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Take care.